Okay, we're going to do another video about some snake husbandry, and we're going to once again talk about some medication. And in this case, we're going to talk about some medication that's actually available to all hobbyists at the moment until our government does further things, because they certainly are shutting down things like oxytetracycline and whatnot for like chickens and stuff. So, as an example, let's say we have a ball python, and maybe the ball python isn't eating well, something's wrong, maybe it recently laid eggs, and it's just not right, it's not eating, just you feel like, hey, my snake just quite isn't right. Well, all snakes harbor ambient protozoa. So that means that you basically, it's a parasite, and it lives in the gastrointestinal system. Sometimes stress, whatever it is, can sometimes put things out of kilter. And the protozoa load, the ambient level of flora in that animal's GI tract becomes like it gets out of whack. So maybe there's too much protozoa. And what happens in a bad case scenario is too much protozoa can cause little micro ulcerations in the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract. That can cause pain, discomfort, ruin the animal's interest in eating. Sometimes the animal will actually feed, start digesting, and then regurgitate, because as it starts gassing up and all these stomach acids, you know, the animal goes through a massive physiological change as it's digesting. And that, with the higher ambient protozoa, which is also amoeba, load in the gastrointestinal system and in the stomach, that can be too much for the animal. And it causes the animal, just animals like, this is so uncomfortable, feels terrible, and the animal regurgitates. So, let's go over a couple things. Where can you get metronidazole, which is commonly called Flagyl? This is a good, cheap way to do it. Fishzole. So I can go find Fishzole online, and it's used for fish. So generally we can get two different dosages. So we get it in a tablet form. So if I get a tablet, it looks like this. This happens to be a 500 milligram tablet. But I can also get this in a 250 milligram tablet. So let's go over some dosing, okay? So, if we wanted to figure out how to correctly dose a snake, so I have a ball python. Let's say sometimes, have you ever noticed a ball python that seems like it's puffy? It almost looks like it's pregnant, but it's not. It's gassy, it's not eating well, it's just not quite right. That is a classic indicator of a protozoan infection. So, as a hobbyist, I can do things. So what we would do is we take the snake's weight, and basically we need to convert it to kilograms. So in this case, we're going to look at pounds, and we're going to divide it by 2.2, and that's going to convert it to kilograms, which is essentially 1,000 grams. Okay, so a python dose, we would be looking at a python or a boa dosage, and that generally means it's 125 milligrams for every kilogram of the snake's weight. Colubrids, because they often have a faster metabolism, we reduce that dosage down to about 75 milligram per kilogram. With lizards, depending on the size of the animal and species and whatever, roughly 75 to 125 milligrams is like a heavy dose. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do this orally, which means I would actually take one of these. So this is basically, this right here, so this is half of a 500 milligrams. So that's actually a 250 milligram dose. So I would need, you know, a fairly good sized snake if I was going to be hitting it with that dose. When we do basically dose the animal, we're going to use forceps. We're going to put this in the back of the animal's mouth. And I'll show that, I guess, in another video, because I need two hands. So we would put this in the back of the animal's mouth, and then massage down a couple inches down the animal's throat, just to make sure everything's set. Make sure the animal has clean water and has immediate water available to it, because often they'll drink, and that helps get the Flagyl into the system. Gets into the gastrointestinal system, and then it is systematically or systemically absorbed throughout the system. So, back to this. Let's do an example. Let's look at a 1 pound ball python. So first I need to convert the pound to kilograms. So I'm going to take the 1 pound, divide it by 2.2, and we come up with the 0.45, which is essentially 450 grams, because remember, a kilogram is 1,000 grams. So we're going to take the 450 grams, or 0.45, And we are going to multiply that by 125. So remember, so we're still trying to convert, kilograms. So it's 0.45 times the 125 milligrams. And that dosage would be a 57 milligram dose. And we're going to go back to this pill. So if essentially this is 250 milligrams, we basically want to just roughly fraction that out. So we all know that 5 times 50 is 250. So essentially I would take a razor, this rusty, crappy razor, and we would try to section this down into a little, like a fifth of this amount. And then we would use the forceps and we would give it to the snake orally in the back of the mouth. And 7 to 10 days later, we would repeat it again. There is another way to also treat with metronidazole, and that way we would do smaller doses, and we'd do a dose. Let's say if we were treating a python, and we really want to be on point. Let's say the animal's really giving us a lot of problems. What we can do is we can reduce this dosage. We can reduce it down to 50 to 75 milligrams. Treat the animal once, and then 3 days later, treat it again at the same, 50 to 75 milligram dose. And then after that, so I've treated it once, wait 3 days, treat it again, and then a week later I treat it again. And that's often enough to interrupt, the protozoan cycle. So another thing I want to point out about this stuff, this is metronidazole, this stuff is wonderful. So whenever you hear somebody talk about Flagyl, that's what this stuff is. This also treats some venereal diseases in humans. So it's it's multi-use in many different platforms. It works for fish like African cichlid or Malawi bloat. I know fish, so it's very, very good for treating these parasites. Oh wow! Did you not read the sign?